This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
In 2008, a podcast was created with one goal: to bring Bat fans around the world news related to movies, comics, video games, television, merchandise, and so much more. And now, the Batman Universe Podcast has returned.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of the TVU Podcast. I'm Dustin, and BJ and Scott are with me this week. And we are back to discuss news, and as promised, we're going to talk about the Scott Snyder controversy. That's going to be a little bit later in the episode, but we do have some news. If you haven't been around, I'm sure if you're subscribed to the podcast, you probably have seen these other podcasts, but over the last 2 weeks, we did have some really cool interviews that Scott did. Just want to quickly plug those and give a listen to those if you are interested. The first one was with Michael Uslan, executive producer on practically every Batman film of all time, other than obviously the 66 film. And then the second interview was with Dr. Travis Langley, who is the self-proclaimed superheroologist, who he is a psychologist who talks a lot about superheroes as well as fandom and how psychology kind of like mixes with those characters and personalities that we see in a lot of really big projects like Batman and Spider-Man and Joker and Stranger Things and a bunch of other stuff. So definitely give those a listen. Both of those guests we're hoping to have again on the show again in the future. So if you do listen to them and you do have questions, be sure to leave those questions in the post for the podcast, and we will, when we have them back, we will try to get those questions answered. All right, so with that, I want to pick up basically 3 weeks ago. The last time we were talking about the Batgirl cancellation. And as you remember, the end of the episode, I was saying that there was going to be an investor call for Warner Brothers Discovery, they were going to be announcing their earnings for the quarter. And we knew that there was probably going to be talk about the Batgirl film to come up. And I'm not even joking. I sat through the entire investor call, and the very first question that came up was, and an investor out of Germany said, we've heard that Batgirl is being canceled. What's the plan for DC if, a character like Batgirl can get canceled? And conveniently, I've got the clip, so let's listen to what he said.
DC is one of the top of the list for us. You look at Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman. These are brands that are known everywhere in the world, and the ability to drive those all over the world with great story is a big opportunity for us. We have done a reset. We've restructured the business where we're going to focus, where there will be a team with a 10-year plan focusing just on DC. It's very similar to the structure that Alan Horn and Bob Iger put together very effectively with Kevin Feige at Disney. We think that we could build a long-term, much stronger, sustainable growth business out of DC. And as part of that, we're going to focus on quality. We're not going to release any film before it's ready. We're not going to release a film to make a quarter. We're not going to release a film the focus is going to be how do we make each of these films in general as good as possible. But DC is something that we think we could make better, and we're focused on it now.
All right. So basically the gist of it was he was asked about DC, and they was talking about the future of DC as a whole. And he basically said that they're working on a 10-year plan to set the DC universe up for the future, because they know that the DC franchise is a major opportunity for them, and they want to get it right. He mentioned Alan Horn, who, for those of you who pay attention to entertainment news, you probably have heard his name in the past. He previously worked at Walt Disney Pictures, and he was there for a long time, worked with Bob Iger, and he was instrumental in bringing Kevin Feige in, and Kevin Feige was the one who kind of worked in, obviously, is the main producer for all of the Marvel films and the direction of everything that Marvel Studios does. So he specifically name-dropped Kevin Feige as well, knowing that they need to have someone in place to, head up the area of the DC films, and he made a point to say that, this is something that they really want to do and they want to get it right. Now, the interesting one comment is he did say at the end that they are going to be focusing on quality, not quantity. They're not going to be aiming to put out a movie every quarter just for the sake of doing it. However, the really interesting thing about that is that also gives him an out for at least the next couple of years if there's no films, because, well, if there's no films, we're working on quality, not quantity. We know the Joker 2 has got a scheduled date of 2024, October of 2024. Honestly, 2023 has Aquaman and Flash. We're probably not going to see anything else past that. There is no word yet on the fate of Blue Beetle, but I imagine that is possibly still coming, just because recently I remember, I think and the problem is I don't know when these set photos are taken, but there was a photo that just popped up of the actor playing Blue Beetle in costume on the streets. So either it's in the middle of filming, and if they were going to cancel it, they would just cancel it and be done with it. They're not going to keep filming it and keep spending money on it. So who knows if, what'll happen with that film, is whether or not it'll actually hit theaters in 2024 or late 2023 at this point. Who knows? But that's the plan. That's at least the plan, according to the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, is that DC is a huge focus for them, and they are going to be working on putting together a team to run the division and put out quality movies and not focus on just quantity.
Which they should be doing. That's what I think I've kind of wanted for a while. Just focus on making a good movie, and then we'll cross the bridge from there. Like 10-year plan, like we've kind of all heard that stuff before. So I'm kind of like, just give me one good movie, another good movie. Let's string together a few good movies. Because who knows when this 10-year plan starts? Is it start now? Is it starting after The Flash? So who the hell knows?
I mean, I think the hard thing is we've had we had a really bad start with the Snyderverse, and things being tied to that, and then there was this weird direction where we were distanced from that, and kind of like floating in limbo. And it honestly, like before, this started happening, it seemed like they were starting to like piece scraps together and get, like the whole franchise out of limbo, and in the meantime, there was like this little like internet war, and it seemed like somewhat of an internal war too, of like, well, do we save the stuff we've already done, in the whole like Zack Snyder vision, or do we ditch it? And it didn't seem like there was a consistent, clear path. They just kind of left it alone. So it's like I like the idea of like a structure, but at the same time, I feel like, at least before the new CEO started axing projects, it seemed like they were finally getting around to having some sort of shape or, trajectory going. It may not have been an exciting one. I mean, having, Michael Keaton Batman basically be, Bosley to everyone's Charlie's Angels may not be the most, like, amazing idea in the world, but it seemed like they were finally starting to get that, and now I feel like we're back to, square one again. So we'll see, what happens, I guess, but that's kind of where I land. Is it's a wait and see, but also, I think I'm tired of like this weird limbo.
I agree. I want quality. As much as I'd love to have a ton of DC films all the time, I'd rather have quality films over the quantity. Out of the stuff, and obviously it's very easy always to compare Marvel to DC, because Marvel is putting out a bunch of films, is, typically their films are doing very, very well commercially. So it's easy to compare that. But I will say, based off of the stuff that Marvel has been putting out over the last 2 years, or I go back even a little bit further and go to before the pandemic, to be fair, the movies that they've been putting out, it's not that they're bad, but I don't think they're not always high quality. They're good films. They're well produced. They've got great effects and stuff, but it's not always necessarily a quality film as far as the writing goes and things like that. I just think about how the Batman was, or even going back to like Chris Nolan's trilogy, those films, they were written very well. They were telling great stories. And then you look at some of the stuff that Marvel's done, and there has been really good ones, but some of them have not been so great. Some of them have just been, almost like they're following a very specific pattern, especially when they're introducing new characters and things like that. So I hope that DC gets it right, or Warner Brothers Discovery gets it right with DC, because that will be beneficial to us as fans. All right, the next news bit that we've got is there was some unfortunate news and kind of weird news also. So yesterday it was announced that Warner Brothers Discovery is cutting even more content from HBO Max, and specifically some projects that have already gotten series orders, have already been greenlit, and now suddenly they're no longer greenlit, which is typically doesn't happen very often. But there was a slew of animated stuff that was announced previously that was coming to HBO Max, and in some ways also Cartoon Network, that has now been completely put on hold to a degree, or they're trying to shop it to other networks to see if they can get some money elsewhere rather than having it in-house at their own streaming service and their own network with Cartoon Network. So the first one was Merry Little Batman. Now you may be thinking to yourself, wait, what is that? This was an animated holiday special that was going to feature a Damian Wayne Robin going around his house during the holiday season. Just basically like like an adventure kind of thing. But there was not a lot of information on this special. I heard about this for the first time, I want to say probably just over a year ago. There was a slew of animated projects that were announced for HBO Max, and it just came up as like a title card and just a real brief synopsis of what it was, but that was it. There wasn't really any other information related to it at all. And then the other major project was Batman Cape Crusader, which I can't believe I'm even saying these words, but there might be a chance that project never sees the light of day, which is crazy considering the talent that is connected to that project with Bruce Timm, Alan Burnett, Matt Reeves, J.J. Abrams. They're all producers and working on the show, and somehow that show is they've deemed it not necessary for their streaming service, which is strange to me because Batman sells. It always sells. It always does really well. That's one of the reasons why so many people are so frustrated when DC Comics puts out so many Batman comics and not a lot of other characters. It's because Batman sells. It always sells. So to have a series like Batman Cape Crusader, which in some ways not necessarily a continuation of the animated series, but kind of like it's loosely connected because of some of the people that are connected to the project. It's just mind-boggling that this isn't happening, or it might not happen. But honestly, I have a hard time believing it could happen because I'm not sure which network, if they can't afford to keep it at their own network at Cartoon Network, which I don't blame Cartoon Network. Cartoon Network doesn't exactly have the greatest track record when it comes to DC shows in the past, but HBO Max, I cannot believe, especially at least the success that has been told to us that Harley Quinn has had, that they cannot have a Batman series that could be successful on this on the service.
I wonder, and this is just like a thought that I had, in the last 10, 15 minutes, because like earlier I was kind of baffled by this news too. But I wonder if, they're getting a new streaming service. So I wonder if they're looking at like a temporary, sell off. Like, let some network run this and give them like first rights for X amount of, months, years, whatever, and then ultimately, they're planning on bringing it back and dumping it on whatever the new Warner Brothers Discovery streamer will be, and it's just like a way for them to like make some cash in the meantime with the intention of getting it back someday down the road. I don't know. Like, it's just such a weird decision because, of all the talent attached to it and like the other Matt Reeves news that kind of came out. It doesn't make sense. And then like the idea that like, since it's a cartoon, you probably have, a slightly different demographic watching it. It's not going to be like all the adults who went to go see the Batman or something. It'll hopefully be, a little bit younger. And that's usually like traditionally what kind of like fuels, those merch sales. And then on top of that, we've also seen a lot of reports with kids content at other streamers as kind of being like a bargaining chip that's stuff that's very actively used by a lot of, by basically an unseen demographic that nobody's really, talking about openly. So it's just, I don't know, end of the day, it's like interesting news, but I do wonder if there's like we're not being told everything and that there's some weird thought in the background. I'm like, well, we'll sell this off for a year or two and then we'll get it back and dump it on, TLC presents HBO Max or whatever the new service will be called.
Yeah, it was a bomb that kind of dropped. Like, you read the headline at first, like, oh my God, they've done it again. They've canceled, they've got rid of Cape Crusader. And it was, I think our last episode I said, like, should we be worried about Cape Crusader? And Dustin, you were like, no, it's Batman, it's Matt Reeves, it's Bruce Timm, everything will be fine. But I don't know what's going to happen. Because if Cartoon Network doesn't take it, where's it going to go? Who knows? Hulu, Netflix? I don't know. I don't know how any of this stuff works.
Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the crazy thing is, I don't know that we said that on the air. I think that might have been after the fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did not ever in my wildest dreams think that this show would have any sort of issue staying on the service. But Scott, you're right to a degree, because I think that probably is what they're hoping for, especially because it wasn't canceled. It's just not going to the service. So my guess is that if it's not going to the service, they're looking to sell it to somebody else for a brief time, or at least sell it to a service, and then like after the first season, then the episodes can be on, the new streaming service that Warner Brothers Discovery has, similar to the way they just did with Batwoman and Superman and Lois and Stargirl. That's another one. They just did that where those shows, the previous Arrowverse shows that they had, those shows had a deal with Netflix, where as long as the shows were running, they would keep being on Netflix. And then it's not until like 4 years after the show ends that the rights of the show revert back to the original holders, which would be Warner Brothers, and then they could put it on their own service. So when they created Batwoman back in, I think that was like 2018, I think it was 2019. 2019 in 2019, when that was one of the first shows, along with Superman and Lois, that Warner Brothers had the ability to not have to have those shows as part of the deal with Netflix, because they were new shows. So they immediately came to HBO Max as soon as they were available. So it is entirely possible that could still happen. The issue is that because it's an animated project, there's not really anywhere that could go. I mean, nowadays there's Cartoon Network, there's still Nickelodeon, and there's still, Disney Channel, and Disney Junior and Disney XD, which are all different channels that are part of that same group. They are definitely not going to be, purchasing a Warner Brothers TV show to put on their service that features a superhero that has nothing to do with them. So there's that. Nickelodeon, I guess, is a possibility, but I don't know that they need, they need to do that either. Cartoon Network was part of the original deal, so they're not going. It's not like, in the 90s where there was a bunch of Saturday morning cartoons where you could have one of the major networks like ABC or CBS or NBC or, or Kids WB back then, or Fox Kids pick up one of these shows. It's just, it's not like that anymore. The only shows that are animated nowadays that are on big network television series are like the adult animated stuff, like Family Guy, The Simpsons, American Dad, or it used to be American Dad, Bob's Burgers. Like those shows, they still have a place, but it's only at Fox. There's none of those other shows, none of the other, major networks are having cartoons on their, or animated shows on their network. So I don't know where this is going to end up. The only thing I could think of is if it ends up at a different streamer. It is entirely possible that Netflix could pick it up. To a degree, Prime Video could pick it up. Just to put it out there, Warner Brothers Television still does produce shows for these other streamers. It's not like they're only in the business of producing stuff for themselves. That's one of the ways that they've always made a lot of money, is by making shows and shopping them to other possibilities. Television-wise, I don't see it happening. It'd have to be a streamer just because of the costs associated with it, but it would be a big deal. Lord of the Rings is a big series coming to Amazon, and that is a Warner Brothers series. And you would think to yourself, why would Warner Brothers have passed on a Lord of the Rings series when they could have put it on HBO Max? And they didn't, because the cost associated with it, they can pass the cost off to somebody else and then still produce it and still eventually have the rights reverted back to them and make money on home video release and all of that other stuff. So,
that's what they did with Sandman, right?
That's exactly what they did with Sandman, yeah, and that was on Netflix. So
yeah,
it's entirely possible that it could end up, but the only place it could end up is it's going to end up having to be like Netflix or Prime Video, because any of the other streamers aren't big enough. Any of the other streamers don't have the money to put towards something like this. So that's the only way it's going to end up happening, is at one of those two, in my opinion. But
you never know.
Yeah,
dark horse candidate Tubi.
It won't. It will not be Tubi. You hinted at the other news. I wasn't going to bring this up, but you mentioned it, so I just want to quickly mention it. Matt Reeves signed a new deal with Warner Brothers, a first look deal for television and film projects going forward. And then also off the that announcement as well today as well, Madison Tomlin. I think it's Madison or Madsen. Anyway, he was the one who came in and helped Matt Reeves work out the third act in the Batman, and then he also recently did the Batman. He did a Batman graphic novel or a mini series that released earlier this year as well, and they sold it as the idea that he was one of the writers of the Batman. It was announced that he's coming back to help Matt Reeves with the Batman 2, so that's happening as well. So those are some little news bits. Not super surprising that Warner Brothers is trying to lock down Matt Reeves. He has plenty of other projects that he produces and things like that, but he's also not to the level of like J.J. Abrams or Steven Spielberg or Chris Nolan, where they don't have to pay an outrageous amount of money to have his talent right this second. They can get him while he is becoming much bigger and keep him involved with the stuff that they've got going on. So there's that. Last bit of news before we get into the Scott Snyder thing is that there was a trailer released for Gotham Knights today. It's called the Villains trailer. And just quickly, I'll have a link in the episode description for you guys to check out the trailer. But it was really cool because it focuses on a lot of like the big bosses that are going to be part of the game. And obviously we've already seen, a variety of different characters, but low-level characters. Like there was hints at Professor Pig, and there was hints at Electrocutioner, and then obviously we assumed the Court of Owls was going to play a big role just because of all of the presence that they've had in the trailers up to this point. But there's a number of other established villains that we've seen, the big bads that we've seen that are also going to be focused. They include Harley Quinn, surprisingly. I didn't honestly think that was going to happen with Harley Quinn popping up over in the Suicide Squad game that Rocksteady's working on. She plays a huge role in that one, so I'm surprised she's going to be here, but I guess if you don't have Joker, why not do Harley Quinn? There's Clayface, Mr. Freeze, and then there's also, they showcased more of the Court of Owls, but specifically I watched it, and I swear I saw Strix, the female Talon, and as well as the hulking Talon as well. So, what do you guys think of the villains that they chose? Because I'm guessing these are going to be like the really big ones. I'm sure there's going to be other minor villains that pop up here or there, but knowing that it's going to be Harley Quinn, Clayface, the Court of Owls, and Mr. Freeze, what do you guys think about the picks?
I mean, the Clayface stuff looked really good. That was probably the most exciting for me. The electrocutioner thing, it was like a blink and you'll miss it, thing in the background. But, Mr. Freeze, I guess, I don't know. What they showcased just seemed like a very techie giant spider bot, or maybe he's got one of those Halo Scarab things.
Batman Beyond Mr. Freeze.
Yeah. And okay, that's fine, I guess. I guess you need like that villain. And then Harley Quinn, I think I feel like they probably have to use Harley Quinn because she's so popular now. She's got to be she's everywhere. She's having her moment has been going on for a while now, and just keep getting bigger. And not that that's a bad thing. I really like how she's in the comics and everything. But I guess I wasn't taken aback or anything by it. Probably the main thing that I was surprised by pleasantly was Clayface and how much of it we got.
Yeah, he looks like he's going to be a big player in this game. He's in a few minutes of footage. I didn't see Electrocutioner, so yeah, I guess it was a blink and you missed it. But yeah, Freeze, he's got his big spider legs. He looks like the end of the Wild Wild West when Will Smith and Kevin Kline fight that. So that's what that reminded me of. And he's got the massive freeze gun. But yeah, it's I wonder how integral to the story they're going to be, because the Court of Owls seem to be the main overall bad guy, and these are just kind of the bosses you beat to level up.
Yeah. And while not a villain, it was revealed that Renee Montoya is going to be also in the game. She's specifically taking the role of James Gordon as commissioner, or I don't know if she will be commissioner in the game, but they introduced the trailer as her meeting the Bat family and saying that, with Jim gone, she knew it was only a matter of time before she would have to work with them. Do you think there could be a possibility of Renee Montoya's question by the end of the game?
I think that would be fun. I doubt it, but I also hope for it. Actually, I think it would be kind of fun if throughout the game, occasionally you're being pursued by the question and you have to dodge her and, hopefully not kick her off any rooftops or anything.
I'm sure they have a alternate skin ready for Renee Montoya's question, where it's she's all teched up too, like all the other ones. She has a crazy mask.
I will say the insane suits. It's getting hard to pay attention to who's who. When there was a scene where in this trailer where Batgirl's walking towards a cell and she comes across Harley Quinn, and I questioned whether or not there was actually Batgirl Barbara Gordon, because I could not tell what version she was supposed to be. And they are really, really hammering the idea of there's going to be a million suits for them, which, great. I know for a fact that this is just a way for them to make more money off of selling skins, but I hope the main game just keeps them within their normal thing that's not constantly changing over and over again, because that could get really annoying really quick for me.
Definitely. Let's just stick to the normal comic book costumes. You want to give them one armored costume, I'll deal with that, but it's too much.
Yeah, I never was a fan of the armored costumes. They just, all the techiness kind of takes away I guess for lack of a better word, the characterization of it, their looks have a lot of character to it, and this kind of just looks like they're blowing Bruce's money,
Yeah. All right, so with that, that's going to bring us to our main topic for today, and we're going to go back in time to July 18th when the Rolling Stone, they released a exclusive article talking about how fake accounts fueled the Snyder Cut online army. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire article. I'm just going to give a brief overview. But basically what the article claims is that in the midst of the downfall of Zack Snyder's Cut and the original Joss Whedon version coming out in theaters, there was supposedly a marketing company that was hired by somebody. They don't say specifically that it was in fact Zack Snyder, but there is implications that it could have been Zack Snyder. And they go on to say that basically this marketing company may have created the entire idea of restore the Snyder Cut or Snyder Cut, hashtag Snyder Cut, or whatever. And the idea behind that is that it could have been Zack Snyder at the forefront of all of this, trying to get what he wanted from Warner Brothers. Ultimately, he did get what he wanted. He was able to release his film, and the article goes on to say that he ended up doing a lot more than what Warner Brothers agreed to, meaning that he got to put new footage in. He got to include Martian Manhunter, which was never intended to be in the film itself. And he was able to do a lot of things that he wouldn't have otherwise been able to do just because of the situation with the insane online army of, I'll put it as, no, I'm not gonna split hairs here. Online trolls is the best way I'm going to throw it out there, because honestly, it got really annoying to a degree whenever you would try to read anything online about the DC Universe, films, comics. It doesn't matter. For years, all I remember seeing was the hashtags that were just annoying and quite possibly a bunch of bots. So what do you guys think of the idea of Zack Snyder kind of being the one who could have possibly been behind the entire movement?
Kind of an egomaniac move, I guess. And the hard thing is like I always want to give him the benefit of the doubt, because while I'm not a Zack Snyder fan, I appreciate, he's like one of those directors that I appreciate he exists, and he has his style. It's not for me, but I look at him the way I look at Baz Luhrmann, where he exists. I'm glad he's there. I'm glad people enjoy him, but not my jam. But I guess the bot thing, to me, if he is behind it, it paints him in a more unsavory light for me, just because, I like when he gave his speeches and stuff about his universe and the whole what his opinion on Batman killing and all that stuff. Like, I thought that was like misguided and like a little more edgelordish, but I could deal with it. But the bot thing paired with all of that, kind of just makes me view him as a little bit more of a, I don't know, a little self-indulgent and, just desperate to like complete his vision and like cater to his acolytes that really buy into his kind of sophomoric religious motifs. It's just, I don't know, I guess end point is I don't think it looks good.
Yeah, the best line in that Rolling Stone article I was going through tonight to refresh my memory was, says that he was Lex Luthor behind the scenes. And it made me laugh. Like, he's a better Lex Luthor than the one he kind of put together in BVS. But yeah, on Zack's, like on his films, like his DC films, like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, like I get why people have criticisms of them, but I like them. Like as the movie, like I'm a defender of the movies, not of Zack Snyder and like the whole bots and the trolls. Like that drives me crazy. And like as before this article came out, when it came out that big like Oscars like stand up and cheer moment that the Flash Speed Force won was all bots, and that kind of made sense. And then this comes out, now you put two and two together. I'm sure he was kind of pulling all the strings kind of just to get what he wanted, taking down whoever he had to.
I would not put it past him. Honestly, he does come across as the type of person who is all about getting what he wants and utilizing whatever he can to get what he wants. And I say that because I remember at various points during the entire Restore the Snyder Cut, movement, he would add fuel to the fire. It wasn't like he was trying to, be humble about the fact that everybody was trying to, get the film back. It wasn't that. It always came across as like, hey, everybody, look what I've got. Here's a tiny taste of what could have been. And it always just felt like he was always adding fuel to like the people who were, already his follower and already interested in what his cut could have been. But I don't know, like the fact the thing that I have such a huge problem with when it comes to this entire situation is it starts off with he left the film because of a family, a personal reason with his family. If he was not looking to leave the film and he legitimately was planning on always staying and doing the film regardless of what happened in his personal life, that's one thing. But he went and did interviews saying that he was leaving because of personal reasons. And if deep down behind the scenes, Warner Brothers was legitimately trying to use the family situation to get him out, I mean, it's crappy, but I could see why they would choose to do that. However, him agreeing to do it is the other side of this, and that's the part that I don't understand. In the article, it talks about how after he was leaving, he took a number of hard drives with footage from the film, and he basically stole them because they were property of the studio, and he took them for his own personal use, and that's where a lot of that unseen stuff that he was releasing periodically during the whole Restore the Snyder Cut movement was occurring. That's where the stuff was coming from, was from these hard drives that he basically took when he left. If he wasn't being forced out and he agreed to leave, why did he take those hard drives? And why would he then also tell everybody that he was leaving because of family reasons if he wasn't trying to save face? So my theory is that Warner Brothers legitimately was trying to get rid of him. He knew that, and the family situation came up, and it was like basically Warner Brothers like, we want you out, basically bow out, resign, not resign, but you know what I mean, but like basically bow out, use your family as the reason why you're doing this because we need to go in a different direction. And maybe because of the family stuff, he, accepted it and was like, you know what, yeah, maybe it is time for me to focus on my family for right now. And behind the scenes, that's, he was content with doing that at the time. But then as, time progresses and he's not thinking about the family situation as much as it was maybe when it was when it presently happened, maybe he starts thinking about, maybe I could have finished the film. There was no reason I couldn't. And he gets mad at Warner Brothers, and that's the whole reason this starts. But I don't understand why he would have went along with it in the first place if he wasn't going to be okay with the fact that they were going to do something else. Regardless of who they brought in, regardless of what ended up coming out, nothing happened until after the film released. It wasn't like anybody was saying, we want the Snyder Cut prior to the film releasing. It was like the film came out and he saw it himself, even though I know he had said multiple times that he had never seen the version of the film that released in theaters, which I think is a bunch of bull. But I think he saw it, and I think he was pissed about the fact that it wasn't his vision. And I truly believe that it's entirely possible that he did this entire thing and orchestrated it. I mean, it's crazy, but I think it's possible.
It sucks though. It's such a babyish thing to do too.
Agreed.
It's not like his case is unique. Like, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. We've seen this happen to other creators, or they were removed from things they were working on, even Batman related. Let's just stick with that. And like years later, sometimes they're a little bitter about it. We saw in a recent interview with Tim Burton, he was a little bitter about it, but you didn't see him like make this crazy campaign or anything. He just moved on to his next projects, and that was that. We saw it with Wolfgang Peterson when that director was going to do Batman vs. Superman in the late 90s when that movie was announced, and Wolfgang Peterson was talking about developing that project. And then George Miller at one point was
Justice
attached
League,
to do... Yep, and
Joel Schumacher said the same thing. I mean, like, every director, I think, has their issues. I mean, even looking outside of Batman, there's been actors headlining films for Marvel that have been pulled. There's been directors who in the middle of the project, they decide to pull the director and change it out with somebody else. It's not something that's unheard of. They did it with the Star Wars films too. They've done that.
Solo.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it's not like it doesn't happen. I don't understand why in a normal situation, it would have never turned into this. You know, when they were making, let's just use the example of Solo. When Chris Miller and Phil Lord were making Solo, and suddenly they're deciding, you know, somebody behind the scenes, producer-wise, was like, you know, we're not going in the direction we want to go in. We're going to shift everything up. They basically fire them middle of production, and then they bring in Ron Howard to finish the film up. You know, Ron Howard, he's working on a film that he didn't really have anything to do with. He's just coming in to kind of like push this thing towards the finish line. I mean, to a degree, Joss Whedon was doing the same thing. I'm not saying that, put aside, you know, the real life stuff with Joss Whedon and the kind of crazy stuff that he's done that's not exactly kosher, but put aside that stuff, you know, he was there to push the film forward, just like so many other directors that have been replaced, and their job is to come in and basically get the project to the finish line to get out in theaters. So, like, we don't see stuff like that happen. There's always going to be some animosity from the director who gets kicked off of a project. That's always going to happen. But it's how you deal with it. And this just comes across as like you said, it's childish. It doesn't make any sense as to why you would end up going this route.
Is it really worth, like, burning those bridges? That's kind of what I wonder, because now that you mentioned, like, directors that carries the finish line, you know, I'm just, like, old Hollywood, like, one of the more prolific, like, consistent directors that they used to lean on was Robert Wise, who was famously kicked off of West Side Story because he was making it too cinematic and blowing through tons of money, so they brought in a musical director to finish it up. But, like, that man's body of work and, like, his relationship with the studio that did it and everything, like, still continued, and it was just a thing that happened. They didn't like it, but it seems like, you know, to handle it with some bit of grace, and then you can keep your relationships and probably get to do the projects you want to do later on down the line. You know, it's not like an all or nothing approach, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
It almost feels like there's been this situation recently where directors get big enough where they know that they, you know, when they have a project, it's going to be well received to a degree. And they get a little bit too full of themselves. And I think that they look at the situation and say, it doesn't matter that this is a film that I'm not paying to make. I'm having somebody else make this film. I'm just here as the creative person trying to get this film created. And I think of a situation that just happened recently where I don't disagree with his reasons, but Chris Nolan, like, you know, very, very publicly was very against the fact that Tenet was going to be coming out on HBO Max, or it was not going to be in theaters, you know, originally, and then they moved it to theaters and they kept pushing it back, trying to hope that the pandemic would be over, and then it didn't, and then it got released, you know, because he insisted on it, but then it did really poorly in theaters just because nobody was going to the theaters. It's not a bad movie. I love that movie. It's a great movie. It's honestly one of my favorite Chris Nolan films past the Batman movies and Inception. But the thing is, it didn't do well in theaters because it was just the wrong time, and you couldn't have just held on to the movie. I mean, I say that, but knowing what we know now, it is possible that they could have held on to the movie. You look at a movie like Top Gun Maverick that they held on to for literally 2 years, and then it ended up making an insane amount of money this past summer. But, you know, I don't know if it would have changed. And Nolan was pushing for that movie to be in theaters, and he was very adamant about it being in theaters. They did exactly what he wanted to do, and then they, you know, 30 days later or whatever it was, 60 days later, they pulled it and put it on HBO Max, and he was not a fan of that. And he, you know, at the time, you know, really, really went in on how streaming was going to ruin everything, and then he very abruptly left Warner Brothers, and now he's got a deal over at Universal. And it's just, you have to think about the larger side of it. Eventually, you don't want to get too big where you think you can do whatever you want, because it's always going to blow up in your face somehow. Like, every big director has a flop. They always end up having a flop. There's nobody who ends up being successful their entire career. And that goes for actors too. I mean, it's just how it goes.
Yeah, I think about, like, the whole Snyder stuff, like, going back from 2017, just all the time that, like, the studios wasted, like, we've wasted, like, screaming about it, or, like, the Whedon cut, the Snyder cut. It's just so much money has been blown, and there's bots and Twitter bots. It's just the story's like never ending. Like hopefully like this story ends it and we never have to like talk about it again. But give it a couple weeks and something will happen.
All right.
Didn't it just came out today that the Batgirl directors said they went to go look for like take their tapes or whatever, but Warner Brothers deleted that like right away or something. So it's like still coming up. Like everyone's like, that's why Snyder did it.
Yeah. So they did an interview talking about theirs, and they were trying to save some footage from the film, and basically Warner Brothers locked them out of the production servers. They couldn't access any of their content that they had filmed. And I get it. I mean, it's one of those things where when you're paid to do a job, you're paid to do a job. It's not your project. You're getting paid to, help create that project. The director might be a much larger role than the cameraman or the the costume designer or somebody like that, but they're still part of that creative element to produce that film. And ultimately the film's not being paid for by any of those people. They're getting paid to be part of that project. And I hate to have to sit here and like say, I get it. Warner Brothers, the big bad wolf. Warner Brothers, they're an evil corporation and blah blah blah. But I don't think that's really the case when it comes to something that they own. If they own it, they own it. There's a certain level of like creativity should be able to be expressed. But when you're working with characters that are tightly held and owned by a large corporation, you don't have the ability to do what you want. And you shouldn't have the ability to do what you want because you're not the owner of that property. The studio, for good or bad, they have to make the decisions on whether or not these characters, how these characters are utilized. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't get is like, if I got a phone call tomorrow to say, hey, do you want to write a Batman comic? And then I go write a Batman comic, and the comic is, making and I say this knowing this has happened, but you're a big star and you get to write a Batman comic, and then you have Batman pee himself while he's wearing his suit. It's an odd choice, but sometimes you could get away with that depending on who you are. But there's a lot of people who, like, if they got a chance to do something and it was going to make the character look really bad and people were going to be upset about it, you would think that somebody behind the scenes is going to have a problem with something like that, unless your name is Kevin Smith. But
we're still waiting for that part two of that story. So
never happened.
Yeah. Release the Whiting Guy part two.
Hey, Warner Brothers, if you're also looking for someone to pitch hit for a script, we're here. I'm here.
Yep. All right. So with that, I know that that topic wasn't extremely long, but I also don't want to spend too much time because I'm hoping with this article and the fallout that has happened from it, I'm hoping that, well, the one thing I will say, just as a final wrap up with this Snyder thing, is that to a degree, Snyder has definitely burned some bridges with Hollywood, because while he does have a deal in place with Netflix right now, he's only making a couple of things here or there. It's not like he has a major, he's producing a ton of content to begin with. He did Army of the Dead for Netflix, and then he produced that spin-off film from Army of the Dead. And that's it. I mean, he hasn't really done anything else. I'm sure he's working on other things, but like he's not going to probably have a lot of business with any of the major studios at this point, which the best thing he can hope for is, these deals with streaming services, because they have no problem with the controversy that surrounds a lot of them, because it's kind of what they bank on is free publicity to a degree. So with that, we're going to wrap up that conversation. And hopefully this is the last time we ever have to talk about Zack Snyder, in my opinion, because I'm honestly I want to put that to bed and never have to worry about it ever again. So with that, that's going to wrap up this episode. If you are interested in finding out all kinds of news or checking out original content or all kinds of other podcasts related to the Batman universe when it comes to movies, TV, merchandise, video games, comics, and everything else related to the Bat fandom, be sure to check out our website, thebatmanuniverse.net, where you can find all of that and even more than you could even probably imagine. We have weekly comic reviews every single week of a ton of the Batman comics that are releasing, and all kinds of other content as well. So check that out. If you are interested in following us on social media, we are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We have a Discord. We're on YouTube. You can check out all of our social links at the top of the page over at thebatmanuniverse.net. If you're interested in getting in touch with us, you can leave comments on this episode wherever you are listening to it. They typically always come back to us, or you can send us an email directly at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net. And last but not least, I mention it sometimes, but if you are interested in supporting us, we have a bunch of different ways you can support us, specifically using our affiliate links over on the website. We have a Patreon where you can get early access to unedited versions of our podcast days before they actually release. And we also have a number of positions within our website and our staff that we're looking to fill, so be sure to check out the Support TBU spots, which can be found at the bottom of our homepage, and you can find all of the different ways you can support us over there. Outside of that, that is everything for this episode. For BJ, Scott, and myself, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Batman Universe Podcast. We will see you guys next time.